Folks, welcome back. Today we're going to take a break from the market crash conversation. I know it's everybody's favorite subject. A lot of people already clicked off the video. Not to worry. Tomorrow we'll get back to talking about how Mega Evolution is down another 2%, how, Chilling Rain is down another 3%, how your favorite slab fell another 5%. We'll talk about it more tomorrow. I know everyone wants to hear about it. Today we're going to switch gears a little bit. And I want to talk about diversifying versus not diversifying in your Pokemon collection, because I've went back and forth on this over the years. I started off basically being nothing but a set picker, a product picker, a card picker. And then I've transferred over when the Sword and Shield era got here to really diversifying out, which I'll get into why. And then as we get into Scarlet Violet era, I'm definitely seeing a opportunity in not diversifying again, just because it's becoming a lot more clear, I feel, than it was in the past. And so what I mean is, when I got in the hobby, I was very much so a set picker, where I would just kind of hone in and focus on a few different sets that I really believed in. I would only buy a few different products from those sets. And I would even, pick up some cards, just some of the cards I believed in, pick up multiple copies of each card. And those were kind of the plays I made. But as Sun and Moon era kind of passed, and I look back at Sun and Moon and XY, I realized a lot of the sets that I didn't pick performed as good or better than the sets I did pick. And some of the ones that didn't perform as well kind of would be outweighed by the ones that did outperform. And I started to look, I'm like, why am I trying to play this game of, picking one over the other? I'll just buy them all and it's probably going to equal out and range to about the same, right? And in Sword and Shield, I think that played out very well, right? Because anyone that was around in Sword and Shield, they could tell you the same thing. Anyone that wasn't around, they're looking back at hindsight, they're like, well, it's obvious. I would have just bought Evolving Skies, Fusion Strike, and you lost Origin. You wouldn't have, though, right? You would have bought Evolving Skies. Now, there was always reprints and rumors of reprints back then, so whether or not you would still be in Evolving Skies or what price point you would have got in, that's up in the air. But everybody pretty much knew Evolving Skies was going to be good. Nobody saw Fusion Strike. Nobody. There was a few Gengar and Mew fans that say, they always believed in it. But by and large, no one was investing heavily in Fusion Strike. Same with Chilling Rain. They were all going for Brilliant Stars. Everyone thought Brilliant Stars was going to be the big, the star, right behind Evolving Skies in the era. You saw how that turned out, right? Everyone thought Vivid Voltage was going to be the star, one of the stars of the era. That Pikachu Rainbow Rare was one of the most sought after prize cards of the era for a period of time. And so there's a possibility you might have been all in on Evolving, Brilliance, and Vivid Voltage. And then when you look at the entire era, you're like, well, if I would have just bought evenly amongst every set, I probably would have done relatively the same as if I was all in on those three sets, right? And that's kind of the motto I had. I'm just like, yeah, I'm just going to diversify over every set. I'm probably going to do pretty much as good as anyone else is going to do trying to pick sets, right? Because if you get it wrong, you're kind of screwed. When we got to Scarlet Violet era, things changed. And what changed was we're having a lot less of kind of position changes. Whereas if you go back to Sun and Moon and XY, you're going to see so many sets change positions in value, right? There was so much that kind of happened over the years that caused people to go back and reevaluate and revalue so many of those sets. And you saw so many sets move up ranks and then move down ranks. And even within the sets, if you go look at Cosmic Eclipse or Unified Minds or Unbroken Bonds, even Team Up, if you did a time lapse of the top 5 hits in the set, you would see those change multiple times over the years. No one could figure out what the best hits in the sets were, right? It was always changing. And when you got to Scarlet Violet era, you don't really see as much of that. It seems like people are getting a lot more kind of honed in and understand, what sets are going to be the most sought after. And so in Scarlet Violet era, right, you could say, well, Alex, just keep diversifying. For sure, and I have, right? But I've definitely started to go heavier on the sets I believe in. And honestly, even if you wouldn't have diversified at all, sure, you would have missed out probably on Obsidian Flames. I don't think anybody saw that one coming, right? You probably would have missed out on Twilight Masquerade, right? Nobody really thought Twilight Masquerade was going to be anything. Even Stellar Crown is nearing $280, $290 a box, and nobody likes Stellar Crown. But you would have been all in on 151. Everybody knew 151 was going to be good, right? You would have been in on Surging Sparks. You would have been in on Destined Arrivals, right? Now, the only kind of outlier is probably Paldean Fates. I don't think a lot of people really believed in Paldean Fates in the beginning. Bubble Mew was not a thing. The Charizard was kind of just a black version, a little bit better than the Obsidian Flames version. It wasn't as obvious. And I don't know if everyone would have been in on Paldean Fates if you were strictly a set picker, right? But you probably would have been on Prismatic Evolutions and so on and so forth. And so when you think about it, it's like, well, if I would have been a set picker, I probably would have picked 151, right? Prismatic, Surging Sparks. Myself, I did and would have picked Paldea. I think it's still a really strong set. And then Destined Rivals. And so then you start looking at everything. You're like, yeah, Obsidian did well. Twilight's done well. Some of the other sets have done well. But all in all, I'm probably better off if I would have just picked the top sets that I thought were the top sets and I would have done well in. And same thing goes for the cards. Like, we've definitely had some position changes in the sets based on basically the illustrations really taking over because of how hard they are to grade. So it's causing their illustrations to become more and more valuable. But when you look at the top cards in the era, it's unlikely it's going to change, right? 151 Charizard. It was the top from the very day it was released. It's probably always going to be that way, right? The Umbreon from Prismatic Evolutions. Probably always going to be the top card in the era, right? The Destined Rivals Mewtwo. Pretty obvious, probably never going to change. And so when you start looking at this, it's not like it was back in the past in Sun and Moon and XY, where, everyone was constantly changing what they desired and what they deemed was valuable. Like when you look at a lot of those later Sun and Moon sets, it's like Unbroken Bonds. Well, the Rainbow Rare Charizard Zekrom or Charizard Reshiram, right, was the top card, right? Well, then, when the Tag Team All-Stars started to take off, well, then the Tag Team All-Stars, people couldn't figure out which one was most valuable. And same thing happened with Team Up. I mean, it's had like, the Ends Reshiram Zekrom card was up there, and then it was the kind of like the stone sculpture of the Arcus Alga Palkia. Then you had I think you had one of the waifu trainers up there for a while. You had the Rainbow up there early on. Like, it's been all over the place, right? The Charizard Breaks and Rainbows up there. And so no one can kind of figure out what they valued back then. Nowadays, it's becoming a lot more clear, a lot earlier. And so it makes it a lot, I would say, more stable to invest in a lot of these, whether it's singles, slabs, products, items. Also back then, everything was new, guys. This whole modern Pokemon thing was blasting off. ETBs were a relatively new item. They had just started at the end of Black and White era and really started to become prevalent, I would say, like middle to late XY era. So no one really knew what ETBs were going to, be and how they were going to kind of fit into the mix. Booster bundles just came out at the end of Sword and Shield era. So we're all trying to figure that out. The PC ETBs, they just came out in Scarlet Violet era. And so everyone's trying to figure that out and how valuable these stamp promos are, how scarce these things are. And so when you look at all that, it's like, well, yeah, but booster boxes have remained steady and the same, right? Correct, right? And then you look at, all the different, I would say, rarities that they had in the past compared to now, where everyone just knows, well, yeah, I mean, SIR is the top rarity, right? Oh, illustration, everyone, kind of knows to look at the population reports. Oh, it's very, very hard to grade. Okay, it makes sense. And so I would just say the hobby is kind of growing and it's understanding where value is derived. Whereas back in the day, it was so new to everyone and it was kind of like the Wild West and everyone was just kind of trying to figure things out. Where I think now that things are getting more figured out, it actually could be more beneficial to try to, pick sets. I know a lot of people in this era who really went all in on 151, right? And they really went hard on Prismatic and now they're going hard on Destined Rivals. And, they left a lot of their sets. They've admitted, I have no Obsidian Flames. I have no SV Base. I have no, Stellar Crown. I have no, whatever else there is. No Journey Together, but, they have Destin and Surging Sparks, Prismatic 151. Maybe if they've been watching my channel, they have some Paldea. But other than that, they don't have a little bit of everything like I do. And honestly, they've done extremely well with that. And they're continuing to do extremely well with that. And I think you can do extremely well with that. And so instead of, kind of spreading your money out into everything, you condense it down and have just more items, more quantity of the few things you believe in. And the same thing goes for products. I've always been a fan of products, not diversifying. Booster boxes are king, guys. They're king. If you can find PCETBs at MSRP, obviously it's a no-brainer. If you can find PCETBs under $200 or $300, it's probably a no-brainer at this point. But, again, now I've been wrong. I admit I was wrong. I still don't like the idea of buying PCETBs when they're $400 or $500 plus. I think there will eventually be a liquidity issue. I think there will eventually be a stabilization. I think there will eventually be some sort of ceiling to these things. But again, that's just my opinion. Whereas booster boxes have shown us there's no ceilings. I mean, we've seen, for a period of time, Phantom Forces, Flash Fire, Team Up, hit 10K, break 10K on some of them. And so it's shown that modern boxes don't really have ceilings. And that's why I like booster boxes. Now, if you are looking to diversify into other items, I will do it as long as the price per pack makes sense, right? So I don't like to assign a lot of premiums to other items, like, collection boxes, tins, ETBs, whatever it may be. But if the price per pack gets so low and you can find deals and it makes sense, you're like, well, Alex, it's basically the same price as buying, 10 loose packs. I can get 10 packs in this collection box plus the promos, plus it's a sealed item. Great. I 100% agree. I'm just not a fan of paying any premiums, anything other than a booster box, because the booster box is going to be the king. It's going to be the most liquid, the most sought after. And it's always been that way since the beginning of the hobby, back with base first edition. And so that's kind of what I've been looking at these days, guys, is like, as we move into the Mega Evolution era and then eventually the next generation, is it going to be smart to really kind of set pick again, to pick out the few sets that you really believe in and kind of allocate more funds to those instead of spreading it out over all the sets and getting kind of more of a mutual fund type portfolio instead of being more of like a stock picker? And again, it's more risky. It's definitely more dangerous, but it could pay off, especially if you have enough experience in the hobby and you are good enough at picking these things out. So that's kind of my thoughts on this video. Again, I don't know if it really got you any closer to making a decision or gave you any real like in-depth knowledge of what to do. I just sometimes like to get my thoughts out on these videos and give you guys something else to think about. But again, I know everyone just wants to hear about the market crash, so I'm sure this video won't get a lot of views. And we'll make tomorrow's title and thumbnail something about, red charts, market crashing, losing everything. And I'll get more views tomorrow maybe. So hope you guys enjoyed. We're out.